acknowledging that, like, I had struggles, I wasn't perfect, but I got second chances, I got opportunities, and I was able to capitalize on those and take them forward. It's funny, people will ask, like, when did you know you arrived? I'm like, arrived? What does that mean?
Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is Mike Rypka, founder of Torchy's Tacos. What started in 2006 with a used food trailer, a red Vespa, and a dream in Austin, Texas has grown into a powerhouse with more than 100 locations across the Southwest. But Mike's story isn't just about tacos. It's about grit, about hustle, about heart, about second chances. In this interview, we're going to actually preview a book that Mike and I had the chance to write together. The title is The Devil is in the Details. And we're going to talk about Mike's experience as a former high school football and baseball player and discuss the rock bottom moments that he experienced and how he came out stronger. Make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, my man. How are you today?
I couldn't be better. I'm not quite Torchy's good, but I'm pretty good.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I will tell you, if there's anyone that hasn't tried your food at Torchy's, I'm going to open the podcast by just talking about how the best part of writing this book with you was the opportunity to come dine in your facilities as often as possible. But I think as great as the food is, your story's better, and
Well,
that's
thank you.
why I'm excited to bring that to these folks. You have the opening chapter of your book may be one of the most dramatic things I've ever read an executive openly share from their history. It begins with 12-year-old Mike, right, in a sewage pipe under, outside of Washington D.C. Your mom, dad at work, and it's pretty dramatic, but it had a lot to do with shaping who you would become.
Yeah.
Would you share the rest of that story?
Yeah, I mean, look, I grew up in, a lower middle class family, and kind of, my parents got divorced when I was young. A lot of sort of struggles there. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom, God bless her, she didn't really know how to cope with that. Most people don't. My dad was also a Vietnam vet. So he came into, being a father with lots of luggage, right? And unfortunately, if people don't do their work, sometimes that gets passed on to the kids. And I remember just even as a young kid, just kind of feeling like, man, I everyone else got the playbook and I didn't get one.
Mm.
And drugs and alcohol, which I ended up turning to, was kind of my answer to getting that playbook. I can remember sort of the first time I got that first buzz of feeling like, wow, I finally feel whole for once. And
But
I always,
it took medicating yourself to do that.
yes, it did. So, unfortunately, that was, what I turned to. And, um, I think, a lot of people, have their things that they can do to sort of help cope with stress and life stuff. And, hopefully it's not drugs and alcohol, but that's at that point in my life is what I found and worked for a little while, but not very long.
Yeah. But you're in the sewage pipe, and you're searching for a rock of crack that you had dropped.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was, at that point, I was very addicted to crack cocaine.
12 years old.
12 years old. I was daily smoking it, all day, every day. Begged, borrowed, steal, whatever I could do to get money to get more crack. And I remember being in that sewer and going, I had two rocks, 220 rocks, and one of them dropped. And I remember just literally breaking down in tears, because that was the last of the money I had. And I was like, how am I going to fix this hole I have inside myself? And I can also remember thinking like, God, there's got to be a better way. You know what I mean? So it's sort of this dichotomy of like, how do I get more? And also like, God, I don't want to do this anymore either.
Wow. It's again, it's an unbelievably dramatic opening to the book because it sets this table of, that's the guy who would go on to found one of the great restaurant chains, one of the great taco havens in America. And I just think the understanding that we all come from someplace and
Yeah.
there's not a cookie cutter approach to what success can look like. And we're gonna talk a little more about the lessons that I learned from you about success.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a sneak peek into chapter 1 of the book. I'd love to ask you maybe what was the book writing process like for you? What was that entire idea of kinda opening yourself up, letting people, understand who you were and how it got to where it is? How did that come together for you?
Well, first off, I don't think I could have done it without you. So I definitely got to give kudos to you, Don. I mean, you're an amazing writer, and you really helped sort of open me up to being able to tell that story authentically in the way that I did. And I think that relationship that we were able to build over the time of writing that book was hugely important. It was very healing, to be honest with you, to be able to sort of own some of my story, or all of my story, really. There's not much I left out in there. Um, and um, and really kind of take it in of like, wow, look at this life I've lived. Look at this life I've been blessed with. Look at these challenges I've overcome. I think it is important to give yourself some time to reflect, give yourself some time to sort of own what you've done. And sometimes that can be stuff that, like, hey, maybe you made mistakes on. Like, take time and reflect on that so you can learn from it. And I think that's important. Just being a human, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? We're all on this journey together, trying to figure out how to be a better human each day.
that's right. I want to talk about 4 great business lessons that I took from your story and that I think are central to the book. The first one is really your commitment to nurturing talent from within. Like, you built this culture organizationally where people can rise from any position and find themselves in leadership. It doesn't matter where you started, it's what do you bring every day.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, and is there a particular story of someone who climbed, that who you're most proud to share?
Probably one of my favorite stories is probably Charlie. Charlie came to us a lot like me and how I started. He was getting off of drugs,
Mm.
struggling with that, trying to get back on his feet. He was in treatment or just out of treatment, I forget. And he came to us looking for a job. And he, like many folks who struggle with alcohol and drugs, had pretty much, kind of tore his life down and was trying to slowly rebuild it. And so he came to us and was going to work as, I think, either a cashier or a cook
Mhm.
on a location we had on 6th Street, which was very much in a bar district.
In
At,
Austin.
yeah, in Austin. And at the
Right.
time, all we had was work at night.
And so
And
he's gonna be his weakness is alcohol and drugs, and you're gonna put him working in right,
well,
genius.
and that's all we had at the time,
Right.
right? But we wanted to give the guy a chance. He had a great attitude and a willingness to work, and he had some restaurant experience. And so we were like, okay, let's, get in here and let's get after it. And, a week after he started, he came to us. He's like, man, I love this company. You guys have been great this first week, but like, I can't do these nights. Like, it's just too dangerous for my recovery and everything else.
Wow.
And which I thought, like, took a lot of
That takes a lot of guts.
it took a
Yeah.
lot of guts. And we said, man, come back tomorrow morning, show up at 8 o'clock. You got a job here. Don't worry about it. And, we moved some things around on the schedule and made room for him. And, he's gone from that to running a restaurant to He was a kitchen manager and running a restaurant, and then he was an area manager for us. And now he runs our training department and helps with opening all our new restaurant openings.
Wow. And through all of that, by making adjustments, you were able to help him stay sober.
Yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. And again, what an important part of an employer relationship. The easy thing to say was, "Shoot, that's the job we have, dude.
yeah,
Sorry if it doesn't work for you."
yeah,
But instead, because of your history, which we're going to get a little more into, because of your history and your struggle, that idea was, let's find a way. We
yeah,
got a guy with a good attitude who wants to stay, but what we have right now can't work for him. We have to find a way.
yeah, yeah,
So, with that in mind, that concept in mind, what it coach me, we got a lot of leaders who are on this podcast, who listen to this podcast. Coach us a little bit on how to maintain that commitment to them. Even he's only with you for a week, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
actually easier in most environments to just say sorry.
yeah.
To coach us, like how does that work for you?
I think it's definitely case by case, right?
Right.
I wouldn't say
But it's
that.
got to be philosophical at its heart that you believe in the second chance and you want to encourage and support the
Yes,
second chance.
definitely that for sure. I think that we have a very big sort of family atmosphere at Torchy's. We put you through the ringer to get on board. We have a pretty extensive interview process, but once we invite you in and get you in here, we really want you to stay. And I think that commitment to our people shows up in that way in terms of how we make sure that we get our hands around people. We have a family foundation that we've started that gives back to our employees, that helps them during tough times. And there's just a very cultural um, philosophy in our company that, like, hey, we don't want to turn people over. We want to make sure that we've given someone every chance they can to succeed, and
Mm.
we've coached them, we've worked with them, and we've exhausted all efforts to make sure that they can succeed. And sometimes, obviously, that doesn't work out. Not everyone's going to rise to the occasion, but more often than not, you'd be pretty surprised, like how often that works out.
No, I love it. That leads to the second lesson, the second business lesson that I took from you. And it's one that I'm going to admit I've struggled with in my employment history as hiring people. And that's that idea of, giving people second chances, right? There are times when someone shows up looking for a job, going through the interview process here, suddenly you see something in their resume that just, you're going, oh man, I don't know that I want that in my environment, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But given that second chances, I mean, you had your own moment earlier in life where you were given one after spending time in jail. Um, Second chances have been important in your development, so you make it important in the life of the company.
yeah.
Why is it so core in the way you lead to give second chances?
Well, I think everyone shows up with a suitcase, right? We've
Mm,
all got a suitcase to bring to the party, and I think it's easy to sort of judge, if you will, like, man, maybe that's not a suitcase I want on my airline. you know,
right.
um, and I think that one of the things that I was given, throughout my life, and definitely, early on, thank goodness, was the ability to see through some of that by other people and to really kind of get in and understand who and what I was. One of our core values is really about originality,
Mhm.
and we really take that on with full heart in terms of just really respecting who people are, where they come from, and getting to understand who they are.
But you're asking the questions and then seeing how are they about answering these questions. I mean, it's a
Exactly.
your
Yeah. And
your
it,
your suitcase is real.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, I think there's also this sense of like, hey, maybe you check all the boxes of a job or job duty, but is this a person like you really want to spend time with?
Mhm.
We used to have an old adage that we would say that, like, hey, am I willing to drive to El Paso and back from Austin with this person? That's an 8-hour drive, by the way, one way. So, and not want to throw them out of the car by the end of the trip. And I think a lot of times that's important. Like, do I click with this person? Do I, is it someone I can work with, someone I can, show up and maybe have a laugh together with? And I think that tends to help as well.
Research shows that 80% of us believe we have a book within us, but the number of people who follow through and do the work to create that book is far, far less. The reason is that the process can seem so overwhelming. And that is why I have partnered with Forbes Books to make the process easier for those of you who listen to this podcast and believe you have a story in you. So if you're ready to turn your leadership experience into your legacy, start your journey with us today at Forbes Books. Visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. It's funny. We had on the opposite end of the interesting spectrum, we had the lead pilot of the Blue Angels on with us, and Alex Armatas. And one of the things he talked about was given the amount of time you have to spend together,
Yeah,
with time that you're flying these jets at such incredible speeds and in such danger, you have to ask yourself, is this somebody I want to spend that much time with? And because everybody's got some level of talent, now it's just
I
can
bet.
can we survive together? Because that's really important. So the third lesson that I took was that you talk about the fact that change is hard, but you have to adapt or die, right? And obviously, especially in the restaurant business, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it doesn't matter what you were a year ago or 6 months ago. It's going to be different 6 months from now. So you better be ready. And if you're not wired
yeah,
to embrace change, that it's gonna be a pretty miserable time.
yeah.
Um, you learned that firsthand when you became the head chef at the World Bank cafeteria at just 22 years old. What was it like stepping into that role, and how did this adapt or die concept take root for you?
Well, man, that was first off, it was super exciting that you would get that opportunity at that age, But secondly, I mean, I was nervous as a pregnant nun walking in there every day. I went into work every day and just was like, oh man, how do I get this done? I had 75 employees in the kitchen. And a lot of them were much older than me, and they literally would laugh at me walking into work. And they would set things up to kind of, you know, make stuff fall or spill or all kinds of
They were
stuff.
punking you a little bit?
Yeah, oh yeah, big time, big time. And
Wow.
so and luckily I had a mentor at the time, actually the chef who had started that cafe, and he said, "Man, get in there and work with them side by side, and you'll gain their respect."
Mm.
And so I took that to heart, and real soon, like I'd get in there 2 hours early before everyone else did. I would set up their stations, put out their cutting boards, their knives, their aprons, so that when they came in, they had nothing to do but get to work. So I would do things that would make their job easier. I'd come bring out their food and stuff they needed to prep. I'd work right alongside with them. I'd do little challenges and say, "Hey, I bet I can cut that broccoli faster than you." Sometimes they'd win, sometimes I'd win. But I started to make it fun, and they started seeing real quick, like, "Hey, I can rely on this guy. Like, he's got my back." And I quickly started to gain a lot of respect with the folks there, to where after about 3 months, like, you couldn't walk in that kitchen and not hear just a bunch of laughing and smiling and joke telling and everybody just having a party, basically.
So I love that because that's also a very foundational window of time for you,
Yeah,
right? And part of the reason which I loved learning while working on the book together was this idea that these people came from all over the world, many of
yeah,
them, and your customers. Remember, World Bank. Your
yeah,
customers were people from all over the world, and they were looking for flavors that were not the flavors that you were used to eating, right? Not the
Yep.
so you had to learn to the flavors of the world in order to do the job, in order to start building a menu and doing things there. Um, some of the things you did there, like going and cooking with people's mothers,
Yeah.
some of your chefs' mothers. Tell us a little bit about how you learned the flavors of the world, because those would come to be really important as you built Torchies.
Yeah, I think, there was, I got there, we had a huge menu. It was set up like, almost a big food court, if you can imagine, with 12 different stations. And each of the stations was, kind of represented, a corner of the world. We had Mediterranean, French, South Asian, African, a sushi station. I mean, we had anything you could think of, right? And being that it was the World Bank, like, if you were gonna make pad thai, like, they kinda wanted it to taste like pad thai they were used to getting, in Thailand, and they were vocal about it, because 'cause they're eating
Customers
there.
were.
Yeah, the customers were. They were eating there every day, um, they were invested just like we were, and so we had 52 entrees that changed every single day, and they would go for 6 weeks. And then they would repeat. So, if you can imagine, that's a lot of different recipes and a lot of different food that we had to, do each and every day. And we fed 3 to 4,000 people a day from just 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. So that was just breakfast and lunch. And I'd say probably 70% of that was at lunch. So our lunches were just insane. And, I got tasked with, "Hey, we need to update this menu. It's stale. No one's changed it in the last, 5, 6 years, and our customers are kind of tired of the same old thing." And, there was probably about 30 or 40% I couldn't change because those were favorites, but the rest of it was up to me. And because I developed these relationships in the kitchen, I remember going out and buying all these cookbooks from, Ethiopian cookbooks and this cookbook and that cookbook and bringing them in. And I was very lucky that, out of those 75 staff, there was about 24 different countries represented on my staff. So I had a wealth of like, cultures and experience of people from kind of all over the world that I could lean on and sort of check like, hey, how does this look for like, you know, masala chicken, you know what I mean? Or chicken masala and many of the stuff I brought, they laughed and said, "That's not what chicken masala is like at all." So, and they were super cool. They were like, "Hey, come to my aunt's house or come talk to my mom or come talk to my sister or my uncle." And they would literally invite me to their house and like make chicken masala with me or pad thai or lumpia from the Philippines. And I can remember just, I had this notebook and I wish I still had it, man. I wish I would have saved that notebook. I lost it somewhere in a move somewhere, but I took all these copious notes and, jotted down. Some of them had recipes for me already, but most of them, it was like watching what they were throwing in the pot and trying to figure out like, hey, that looks like a teaspoon. That looks like a cup. Um, and then taking that back and working with my crew and getting that so that, we could make chicken masala for 400 people at a time, right? And so, big task, but I just got a lot of learnings and a lot of experience around, how different cultures maybe use cinnamon or use this ingredient or cilantro or, the way they, marinate their beef versus somewhere else. And so I got a big crash course. I always call that job my PhD program from college.
Wow, I love it. What just super huge business lessons right there. Thank you.
Yeah.
But the fourth one of the lessons that in your story that really stood out, and this is the theme of our podcast, right? Sports shaped a little bit about who you became. You played defensive end for your high school football team, pitched for the baseball team. Is there a story from those days that and that desire to play sports as you did? Something that happened that maybe on the field that might have taught you a lesson?
Man, I absolutely love sports. I did any and all sports I could do. I ran track, I skateboarded, I played football, baseball, soccer, basketball, and I think the thing I learned the most, especially, getting into team sports is, there's no I in team. And it takes everyone doing their position to move the ball forward.
Mm,
It takes everybody in their position to get the 3 outs in baseball. Hey, the pitcher can do a lot, but if that batter catches a ball, your shortstop better be on point to be able to get him out at first, right? And your first baseman better be able to catch that ball. And so, it really takes the community in which you're a part of to make it happen and to win.
yeah,
And
and that's probably like a kitchen.
yeah, very much so. Very much so.
And so how do you bring and make sure to keep that? Because again, a lot of folks, aren't team players, right? How do you get team players, to join to or to make sure that you inspire those who might not even typically think of themselves as a team player to realize that that's a requirement?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that, especially at Torchy's is just, there's this level of accountability we have, and not in the sense of like punishment or you're bad or anything else, but I talked earlier about, kind of having this family atmosphere, um, and building that culture of like, hey, we're in this together. We do pre-shift meetings before every shift. That's hugely important. So there's a lot of communication on what's coming up. Do we have a catering today? Is the weather bad? Is the weather good? What kind of business do we expect? Are there specials we're running that we need to focus on? Is there something we need to pay extra attention to? Was someone sick and couldn't make it, and we need some help to cover another spot? And all of that sort of just communication and accountability really helps bring in that team mentality. Another thing, like with our prep cooks, one of the things that they have to bring a tasting spoon to a manager every time they make a recipe. Um, and what that does is that creates a lot of pride in our prep cooks, because they don't want to make something and then bring it to someone and know that it doesn't taste good.
Right, I love it. It's so many great business lessons here, but so today, you walk into a Torchy's and someone sees flash, they see vibrant, big restaurant, incredible graphics, it's unbelievable, but and you're in cities all over the place. But it wasn't always that way. It started, and you made already a little reference to it, as a single food trailer,
Yeah.
back before food trailers were cool, by the way. I
Mhm.
love the way you point that out. With you personally delivering tacos on a red Vespa to
Yeah.
people around, right? Just making sure that people understand who you were. You were going door to door, just trying to draw customers in. In the
Yeah.
early days, you were maxing out credit cards just to keep things going, and every day felt like, I'm sure, like it was an adventure. But can you take us back to that time? And what was one of those make or break moments where you weren't sure if tomorrow would even exist?
Oh man, there were many of those days, Don.
I know. I'm just looking for one because I think that's the cool part about your story is that while
Yeah.
there were many, almost every one of the ones that you shared to me was riveting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can remember when we found our first investors that helped us open our first brick and mortar. We had 2 trailers worth of, financial data to, prove that, hey, we were a successful business, which wasn't much when you're trying to open a brick and mortar. But they took a chance on us and they loved the food. And, we gave them 50% of the profits for the first 3 years, which is,
Crazy.
crazy, but they were taking a huge chance on us, and I think they ended up, like, tripling their investment, which, so they won, we got to get our first brick and mortar open, and I think it just, a lot of tenacity, a lot of hard work kinda helps open you up to some of those successes that come your way.
I love it. You've already made reference to while at the World Bank, you had a great mentor, and I know part of that story, but you also talked about Michael, who is kind of a sounding board for you, mentor for you, investor in you, if you will. Um, But mentorship's an important part of most entrepreneurs, right? And how do you go about even today, as you're successful, How do you go about keeping the need alive to go create mentor relationships?
That's a big deal. I think, if I've always been a bit of a seeker, so I've always been interested in learning. I think that's important. It's funny, people will ask, like, when did you know you arrived? I'm like, arrived? What the hell does that mean? I haven't arrived. There I belong to a YPO group, which is awesome. That's a young professionals organization. I'm involved with that. And so it's another group of entrepreneurs and CEOs where we get together and talk real stuff and bounce ideas off each other and challenge each other. Um, and I love that. I love those relationships. So that's one way that I do it. And also, through some networking, and just, being open to learn.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's reading some books, industry books. Sometimes it's, going to a conference and hearing someone speak on a panel on a subject that maybe I'm curious about or, want to learn more about. So I think it's just really about being open and open to new ideas.
When you look back at everything though, the hustle, the risks, the growth of Torchy's, you've had even ups and downs in the growth, right? What's something you're most proud of from your journey that maybe the outside world doesn't always see?
Probably the thing I'm most proud of, and we've talked about it, quite a bit in length, just the opportunities that, my folks have been able to get. I mean,
Mm,
there's just nothing better than that for me. I mean, to know that, I had opportunities early on. People, picked me up in their cars and took me to recovery meetings and, sat with me, at 12 midnight when I felt like, running off and smoking a crack pipe and they talked me off the ledge and, being outside of 7-Eleven just dying to go in and buy some beer or steal some beer and having the umph to call someone instead and them talking me off the ledge. So to be able to pay that forward with people in my company and give folks the opportunity to succeed and build a career and make something out of them, like, there's just nothing for me that's better than that. And really, that's still one of the things that drives me today is being able to, see and watch those stories happen constantly in our company. It's amazing.
and now, how many folks do you have working for you now?
We're about 5,000 to 6,000 employees now,
Isn't that
so it's a
crazy?
lot. Yeah.
That that's a lot of folks who are leaning in to, the opportunity you're giving, and for many of them, it's that chance to prove themselves something that others weren't letting them prove.
Yeah. One thing that's really awesome is, so every month I sign anniversary cards for people who've been with us 10 years or more,
Uh,
and that list is never less than 10, 15 people, and many
wow.
times double that. So if you think about that, like, that doesn't happen too often, especially in restaurant companies, where you
Not
got
in
people who've
restaurant
been
companies.
with you for 10, 15, 16, 17 years.
Wow. Mike, it was an honor telling your story. And I would tell you, I'm going to say to the listeners, it would be a greater honor if those who are listening took time to read it. We're actually going to put the Amazon link in the show notes because we want people to
Awesome.
go there, buy that book, and encourage people to get a copy. You've been one of my favorite folks to work with. This has been a long journey. It's been
Yeah.
exciting. Holding that book when it comes into your hands for the first time is never a dull moment.
No.
Um, Thank you. Thanks for being my teammate. Thanks for being a corporate competitor with us today.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Don. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your help in writing this book and just it really came out special, man. It was that, and it's funny because I really do think the story needs to be told.
Mhm.
And it's not really even about me. I mean, the book, I don't get any profits from the book. The book goes right to support our family foundation. 100% of the profits go directly to our employees. And I think that it's something people should read and it's a very inspirational book. So it's awesome that it's out there in the world.
Mike Ripka, I appreciate you.
Thank you, my man. Great to see you, brother.
I love me some Mike Rypka. Now, I love some Torchy's tacos too, but Mike Rypka is awesome, and working with him was a true pleasure. But several things that I learned in the conversation today, several things that he said that I hope resonate with you as well. First off, the importance of writing a story. And that the idea, and this is not a commercial, but the idea of telling his story was healing for him, and the idea of reflecting back on what he had achieved was really meaningful because often as leaders, as entrepreneurs, we're in such a rush, we're moving so quickly that we're not getting a chance to take time to reflect. Doing the book allowed him to do that, and it was, as he said, it was encouraging for him. The second big takeaway was that story he shared about the employee named Charlie who, was dealing with a drug and alcohol addiction. The job that they gave him put him to work in a district with a lot of bars, and he was working there till late at night. And he had to realize that in order that Charlie had to come to his bosses and say, "Hey, this isn't good for me," and he did so within a week of starting the job, which I think speaks to the culture of the organization, the idea that you have that the people could say that. But because he spoke up and because Mike's response was, "Hey, you're right. And as somebody who's dealt with that, I'm gonna find another place for you." Today, years later, Charlie runs the training department for the company, right? Mike and the organization wrapped their arms around him and said, everyone shows up with a suitcase. We just got to make sure that we load the right suitcase on the plane so we can all take off. Um, Third was that experience at the World Bank. What great content, right? That idea that there he was as a young leader. Many of you might have had these experiences. I did as a younger leader, where I was by many years younger than people who had to work for me, quote unquote. And yes, there's some punking that happens in those moments, right? Yes, there are opportunities to remind the young boss, that they're not as qualified as maybe we might be. And in that situation, Mike didn't respond negatively. He actually said, "I'm going to dig in deeper. I'm going to get there 2 hours before they do. I'm going to set up their cutting boards. I'm going to challenge them to try to see who can cut broccoli faster." But whatever it was, he was doing that work to try to show them, hey, he was there to make their job easier, which is what a great leader is there to do. And with all of that, he ends up getting invited to their homes, getting a chance to cook with and learn from their grandmothers and their aunts. And the end result is it is that experience and the flavors that he learned to manage and navigate during those trips to those homes that allowed him to create the taco company that today is one of the fastest growing in America. So, how you manage those moments could have great impact over the course of a lifetime. And then finally, I loved it when he said that sometimes people ask him, "How does it feel now that you've arrived?" And his answer, "Arrived? What does that mean?" No, no, thank you. I'm a seeker. I'm going to continue to grow. I'm going to continue. It doesn't matter what level of success you perceive. I'm a junkie. I'm a junkie for learning now, right? And that's who Mike Ripka is. Great lessons. I hope you appreciated them. I hope they will resonate with you. I appreciate you.